Hi everyone, I'm glad you made it out despite the freezing temperature. Welcome to What's It Like to Teach at a Liberal Arts College. The goal of today's panel is to give you information about work life at liberal arts colleges, and I want to thank their panelists in advance for sharing their experiences and perspectives with you. I want to highlight what's in your packets, and I realize I didn't bring one up with me, so I won't be able to, oh, thanks, Sara. Usually I kind of hold it up to show it. So the cover sheet of your packet is our agenda, which includes just some brief information on each of our panelists, but let me briefly introduce them to you in the order they're listed on the agenda. Professor Dan Birchok, who is at the end, is a visiting assistant professor at Oberlin College. Dr. Birchok received his PhD here at Michigan, and his expertise is in anthropology and history with a focus on Islamic practice and history in Southeast Asia. Second, Professor McCaffrey, who's seated next to Dan, is Associate Professor of Chemistry at Albion College. She received her PhD from UNC Chapel Hill, and her research lies at the intersection of physical, organic, and inorganic chemistry. Third, we have Professor Andy Mozina in the middle, who is Professor of English at Kalamazoo College. He earned his PhD from Washington University in St. Louis, has published critical work on Joseph Conrad, and his research focus is on writing fiction. Finally, we have Professor Annemarie Sammartino, Associate Professor of History at Oberlin College. Professor Sammartino received her PhD also from Michigan, and in 2010, she published The Impossible Border, Germany and the East, 1914 to 1922, which used migration in and out of Germany to examine the crisis of state sovereignty during that time period. She is currently working on mobility, urban, and spatial planning in post-war America and East Germany. They will each be sharing much more about themselves and their institutional context and experiences shortly. On the reverse side of the agenda are several resources about liberal arts colleges and job searches for you to peruse after the panel. Next in your packet is a brief but very informative article on working at a small college or university, which is entitled Small is Different. And lastly, there are several flyers for VRLT and Rackham preparing future faculty programs that might be of interest to you. The flyer with the teal background describes the Mellon Foundation funded postdoctoral fellowships for those who are in the humanities and humanistic social sciences at Oberlin and Kalamazoo Colleges. I encourage those of you that are interested and in these fields to apply. Professor Birchok is currently one of the Mellon postdocs at Oberlin, and Professor Mozina is the postdoc coordinator at Kalamazoo College, so they can also answer any questions you might have about these programs today during Q&A. If you aren't in the humanities or humanistic social sciences, on our website you can find information about postdocs at liberal arts colleges, and the link is on the reverse side of the handout that I mentioned earlier. Next in your packet is a flyer for the Preparing Future Faculty Seminar, which is a 5-week seminar in May designed to help prepare senior graduate students for faculty positions. More information on the topics of the seminar is available on the handout, and applications this year are due on February 24th. The last flyer is for the Rackham VRLT mentorship program. This program offers U of M grad students and postdocs an opportunity to meet faculty at nearby colleges and universities, to work together on teaching and research, or to learn about students and campus life at places other than the University of Michigan. You can participate in a short-term mentorship experience through this program and be reimbursed for meals or travel expenses associated with carrying out that mentorship. So more information, if you're interested, is on the handout, and you can apply at any time. This brings me to today's agenda, and I'm going to turn things over to Professor Sara Blair, who is Associate Dean of Rackham and Professor of English here at U of M, and she will be moderating our panel today. I know the microphones need to be turned on. Just as a reminder to our panelists, folks might not be able to hear you unless you flip the switch on.
Thank you, Laura. Can everyone hear? Okay, great, excellent. I'm delighted to be here. Rackham is thrilled to be able to support this kind of opportunity. And you've just heard a huge menu of opportunities that are out there for you that many, many, many colleagues at Rackham, at VRLT, around the university are working hard to prepare for you. What we're here to do today in the room, I hope, amongst all these opportunities, will feel particularly valuable. This is our chance, your chance, to have a real-time, on-the-ground, face-to-face conversation about what it's like to pursue a career path at a liberal arts college, an institution that has been a home for many, surprising number of Michigan Ph.D. alumni as they move into productive, successful, really dynamic careers. So this is a really special opportunity. I'm very grateful to our panelists for coming and agreeing to share their experience, their insights with you, and give you a chance to ask all the questions you may have. Wanted to start by asking each of them to say just no more than 5 minutes informally under the rubric or the heading something like what I wish I had known about liberal arts colleges and what might be most important for you, all of you, to know at this point in your careers. So do you want to start?
Sure, I can start. What I wish I had known. Oh. I'm just going to turn it on. Can you hear me? Is it on?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to turn it on and put it down like this. So what I wish I had known. So I'm Daniel Birchok. I was sitting where you are last year at this time, although I wasn't actually in the session, but sorry. I'll say a few things. The first thing I wish I'd known is that, or that I wish I'd thought more about, was that I'm not sure the category of liberal arts college is actually always very helpful to how we think about different kinds of schools. How many of you went to liberal arts college? Okay, I did as well. The place where I did my undergraduate work was a very different institution than Oberlin, where I'm teaching now. And you can think about this in all sorts of ways, right? The institution I went to was a 4-4 institution. My professors were all teaching 4-4 versus 2-3. Is that what it is?
2-2.
2-2, 2.5.
It's technically 4.5 classes over per year.
Yeah. Okay. There were different loads on professors. You have different kinds of settings when it comes to rural, urban, different ethoses of different institutions, and so. In some ways this may seem intuitive, but it's not always, because when you're on the market, you often think in these categories of R1, R2 liberal arts, and I think if you're really serious about thinking about where you might fit, you need to think a little more specifically than that, and so that would be the first thing that I think I've learned. The second thing is that coming from Michigan, you should be confident, or I should have been more confident about my teaching experience. I often heard you're coming from a large research one university, your teaching experience could be considered suspect. The truth is that as GSIs here, most of the settings that we teach in are actually pretty close to liberal arts settings. We're teaching discussion sections. And there are lots of opportunities as well to teach. I did a Sweetland writing seminar course. I taught a seminar on anthropology that was self-designed. I know when I was where you are last year, I was having doubts about how my teaching experience would play out, I've learned that is absolutely not the case. That I think that what I did here really prepared me. And then the third thing I'll say, as far as what I've learned, is as in anything in life, throw a lot of your assumptions out. And part of this falls under the rubric of every institution is different, and you should sort of find out what each institution is like. But one of the things that surprised me about Oberlin and my department at Oberlin was that they really wanted me to lecture, and my students really wanted me to lecture. My stereotype of a liberal arts institution was students want to talk, they want to have discussion classes. But my department felt that for a 200-level class, I should be doing more lecturing. And even on my student evaluations, this is what really shocked me. My students wanted me to lecture more. They were like, you have more to tell us. You're holding back from us, right? Like, let us know. That really kind of flew in the face of what I thought of again, when I thought of a stereotypical liberal arts institution. That doesn't mean, I don't, it's been an interesting negotiation for me. I do lecture a lot, but I don't lecture as much as maybe clearly my students wanted, or perhaps in my department. But the point is, again, throw those assumptions out, because it's every institution is different, and people, and students and faculty are different in each place. So I'll leave it at those three things. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vanessa McCaffrey. I'm in chemistry at Albion College. I'll ask the opposite question. How many of you guys did not go to a liberal arts school? Okay. And one of the, I think, the misconceptions and the way that I'm going to approach this is maybe things that I wish that not that the things that I wish I had known, but maybe the things that I've learned that might have helped me a little bit. But one of the misconceptions that I think a lot of people have is that only people who have a liberal arts degree actually teach at liberal arts colleges. I didn't even know what the liberal arts was when I got this job. And I've learned it. And I think that I kind of wish I'd known a little bit more going in, but I also started as an adjunct. I didn't start as a tenure track person going in. So I had a lot of on-the-job training, which was invaluable to me. It really, really was invaluable to me. One of the things that I've learned is I've become more of a generalist than a specialist. In the sciences, and in chemistry in particular, we have our little departmental silos within chemistry. You have an organic, you have inorganic, you have physical, you have analytical, you have biochemistry. And you're one of these types of chemists. And as I was introduced, I'm a physical organic chemist with a very large project in inorganic chemistry, side project in analytical. I collaborate with a physicist on a project in origins of life. Okay, so I do everything, and I'm not afraid. If someone comes to me and says, hey, you know what, I've got a chemistry question. I don't think I've ever said, you know what, that's not my specialty. I'm like, sure, come on in, let's see what we can find. And so always be open to learning. And you know, I started out as organic chemistry. I'm actually teaching advanced inorganic chemistry for the first time this year. And flexibility is really, really, really important. I've taught non-majors courses, I've taught honors courses in cooking, the science of cooking, not just a cooking class. So flexibility, I think, is one thing that I didn't realize how much of an academic contortionist that I'd have to be going into this job. So
That's great. Thank you. Andy?
It's on. Oh, it is on. It is on, isn't it? Okay. Hello, I'm Andy. I guess I would echo some of the things that Daniel and Vanessa have said. Maybe at one angle I would add about something I was surprised about when I took a job in a liberal arts setting, was how much faculty service is required to do that type of job. My institution, I think, is reasonably well-resourced, but not particularly well-resourced. And I found that in talking to other colleagues, when you go on the job market, one thing you might do is look at data like endowment per student and start to get a sense for how well-resourced that institution is, because the less resourced it is, the more likely you'll have to wear many more hats and do a lot more service work. It also depends on the ethos of the institution, how much faculty governance there is. So in my 14 years at Kalamazoo College, I've been a department chair, I've been on the search for the CFO for the college, I've been on the search for the human resources director, I've been on a planning and budget committee, a committee that chooses the health insurance, an admissions committee. You know, you basically do pretty much anything the institution does. There may be a moment at which there's faculty involvement, and you may be involved in it to a surprising degree. So that was something that, and in terms of my time commitment, in the past 5 years, I've probably spent more time on service than I've spent on my writing. Okay, we are all expected to publish, and we do publish. Not at the rate, of course, at an R1 or an R2, but that is something, there's an extra balancing element that you have to consider, and it does vary significantly. If the school is relatively well-resourced, you might not have as many advisees because there's just more faculty per student. and things like that. So it's just something to consider as you consider a liberal arts institution.
Thanks. I'm going to try and do this without a microphone because I'm pretty loud, but if you can't hear me, I will switch to a microphone. Anyway, my name is Ari Sammartino, and as Laura said, I teach at Oberlin College in history. And I guess I wanted to add just a couple of things to the really excellent comments that all of my panelists have made. And the first one is about applying to a liberal arts college. And here I want to really stress, actually return to something that Dan said about the differences between different liberal arts colleges. If you're going to a liberal arts college like, and I'm going to speak about Oberlin because it's the one I obviously know the best, where you've got faculty that have a 2-2 to 2-3 load, which is what we alternate 2-2 and 2-3 years, you're expected to emerge. You will not get tenure without a book, with a university press. You will not get, and you are expected to come in with a serious research agenda. It's not very different than what your expectations are for tenure anywhere at an R1 or an R2. Given that, we don't put the paragraph about teaching first. Put the paragraph about research first. I can guarantee you, I've been on many searches, we have never hired someone for their teaching only. And in fact, people who say, I want to teach at a liberal arts college because I care about teaching more than research, are people that go to the bottom of the pile. And so I want to make that really clear. That's not true at every institution. There are plenty of institutions where that might not be the case. But if you're going somewhere where you know that there are those kinds of tenure expectations and that kind of teaching load, expect that to be what people are on the other side of the table are going to be looking at from you. Another thing about applying that was not an issue for me really because the kind of school I went to, but if you went to a liberal arts college and you are lucky enough to get to apply to that same liberal arts college, do not talk about how much you loved your liberal arts college experience. Everyone in the room will be like rolling their eyes at you. Don't do it. You don't need to. So those are my two comments about applying. Like treat it like it is. In other words, take it seriously and treat it like a real job. And don't condescend to liberal arts institutions, which I know a lot of people, I went to Michigan as well, tend to do because there's this kind of way in which, it's this expectation, like people will sort of talk, oh, you really love your job, et cetera, and it is a great job, but you have to take that part of it seriously in the application process. As far as working there, one thing I wanted to also add is that, the students at a liberal arts college really are great. They're, as a rule, there are obvious exceptions, as there are anywhere else, but for the majority, you've got really excellent students. However, one of the things that I found difficult in a way, coming to a liberal arts institution, especially right out of graduate school, and especially if you're on the young side right out of graduate school, is setting clear boundaries on your time. So students would love to have dinner with you. They would love to come to your house at random times. They would love to just spend time with you. And while on one level that's kind of flattering, on another level it's creepy. And it's important for you as a faculty member to learn how to set appropriate boundaries with people who are, on the one hand, much more sophisticated in a lot of ways. A lot of Oberlin students are academic kids, so they'll come up to you and be like, so how's your book coming along? Do you have a contract yet? And all this stuff. It's a little weird, but that doesn't mean that they're adults. And knowing how to set those boundaries, which is something you do as a GSI, is really important to be able to do. Another boundary it's important to be able to set is on things like service and teaching and research, being able to balance those things in a way that works for you. One nice thing about being at a liberal arts college is that, especially after tenure, you really do have the opportunity to frame your career how you want to. And there are plenty of people at my institution and others who take whatever path they want to take. And there's quite a diversity of that. However, you have to be proactive. If, for example, you're trying to finish a book, don't go on the big committees. If you do, on the other hand, want to do that sort of work, don't expect to get as much research done. If you're going, you can only let teaching take a backseat for so long. That's, at a liberal arts college, that's very important. On the other hand, there are ways of sort of strategizing your time, not taking on new classes, but when you don't have to, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it's really important at a liberal arts college to recognize the freedom, but also figure out how to set limits for yourself. So.
These comments make me mindful that it may be important to underscore for our listeners in the room that the Liberal Arts College not only varies enormously in terms of culture and the history of the institution and what life or experience on the ground there is like, it's also kind of a moving target. And one of the things that liberal arts colleges are being called on to do at this moment, differently, but with the same kind of intensity that, say, research institutions are being asked to justify their existence. There's a good deal of that kind of rhetoric and that kind of questioning around the value of the liberal arts as the sort of site for generating higher education. So not to go all philosophical here or get meta or conceptual, but it does seem good to a good moment to ask all of you on the panel to kind of come back to the perspective of people who hope to be new colleagues potentially at these kinds of institutions. Just a couple of minutes maybe from each of you. What would you be looking for at this moment in the life of your own institution or in the sort of career of the liberal arts as a mission or a project? What would you be looking for in new colleagues who would be seeking to join your faculty?
I'm gonna pass on this one, just because I literally have been working at Oberlin for a semester as a postdoc, right? So I may have some thoughts at the end from where I'm sitting, but there are three other people who are farther along and more qualified to answer this particular question. Yeah.
So this is an interesting question because we're actually in the middle of a search right now. So I can tell you really what we are looking for, at least at Albion in chemistry. One of the things related to what Ari said is that we kind of are looking for Superman or Superwoman, to tell you the truth. We want someone who can have a vibrant research program with undergraduates, and this may be very specific to the sciences and chemistry. We want whoever is coming into this position to do research and make sure that undergraduates are involved, either during the semester or preferably during the summer. We also want someone who is committed to teaching and who has a very strong interest in teaching. So we look at the file and the application as a whole. That does not preclude someone who has little to no teaching experience. That doesn't mean that we throw that file out. We do seriously look at GSI, is this graduate student instructors? Okay. GSI experiences for you guys, TAing experiences. The initiative, was your advisor out of town for a week and you took over their class? Those types of experiences outside of discussion-based GSI experiences in the sciences, you're probably mostly doing labs. But have you stepped up? Have you offered to take a class? If you are lucky enough to get an adjunct position, that is also important. So for us, we are looking for people who have interest in both research and teaching.
Yeah, I would echo what Vanessa is saying and say that we do emphasize teaching, and it's okay to lead with teaching for us in an application. It's a cutoff for us if you have not had independent course experience where you've sort of had your own class. That is something of a cutoff. The teaching philosophy, we'll request a teaching philosophy statement. That's important. And when you make a campus visit, your teaching demonstration will be really important. At the same time, you will be expected to have a clear publishing agenda, and people who have already published also get a leg up in the initial review of applications. Yeah, and then you really need to be also we're looking for a certain type of energy too that we feel our students will respond to, that you will feed off of that contact as opposed to wanting to, well, it's a balance. What Ari's getting at is really important. You're both always out there. There are going to be a lot of demands on you, and because of that, you have to draw your lines. I guess the thing I would stress, the side I would stress, is that when you are out there with them, you are high energy and you're highly engaged and you enjoy that, a lot of back and forth, and people showing up for office hours wanting to talk about where they want to go on study abroad, or talk through in depth the project that they're working on.
Yeah, I want to echo much of what my colleagues have said. I mean, I think that, we're also in the middle of a search right now. So I've been thinking about this a lot. And we actually, for us, it is not there are plenty of people, myself included, who get hired at Oberlin without independent teaching experience. I had GSI'd 2 classes before I got the Oberlin job. And in fact, I remember sitting in my teaching orientation, like this big meeting for all the first year faculty, and someone was talking about the classroom, and suddenly I thought, what do you do in a classroom? Like what is going to happen here? And it worked out okay. I eventually got tenure, but and it was fine. But it is true that we're less, what we're looking for are people who have interesting minds. And interesting minds, both in terms of like their research is interesting and surprising and comes at us from a new direction, and the classes that they propose. So what we do is we don't require a teaching philosophy or a teaching demonstration. Your job talk essentially, we see that as it's kind of teaching demonstration, although it's geared like it's a normal job talk, but there are undergraduates in the room, and we pay a lot of attention to how you answer their questions and how you interact with them. If you go on a job visit, you meet with undergraduates, and we do care what they have to say, although it can be a little idiosyncratic at times. But what we're looking for are people who, like, when they propose classes, they sound excited about them, and they have interesting ideas about what those might be. And they're able to, and this is to echo something Vanessa said earlier, speak broadly. So they're not just interested in teaching their dissertation over and over again, but they have sort of a mind that works in sort of broader ways. And then, so I mean, like a phrase that comes up a lot, which is very controversial, but you hear all the time at Oberlin and searches, is quality of mind. Whatever that's supposed to mean, but what it means is that kind of a combination of sort of interesting, open, engaged way of approaching the world. Now, part of what this means as well is that it really is a personal process. We are thinking about, as you're saying, what is someone going to be like in office hours when someone comes and wants to talk through their very inchoate plans for an independent research project? Or how are you going to help people focus in, thinking about postgraduate careers or whatever? We're thinking about what that experience is going to be like, even though we're also thinking there's plenty of support to help people become better teachers. And so a lot of it is about personality. And you can't fake your personality, and it's not that we're asking everyone to be exactly the same. There's a huge diversity of personalities. But we are looking for people that we can kind of imagine connecting with some coterie of students. And helping them, not just connecting with them, but also helping them to sort of teaching them in a sort of personal environment, both relatively small classes and office hours. So, did you want to add something?
Yeah,
sure.
It's the curse of having a last name that's early in the alphabet, is that you're called upon to answer from this person. I'm often someone who needs to think about things, and this is really useful. I'm going to throw a couple things in now that do come from my perspective. After one semester and being on the job market recently and being on the job market now. The first piece of this is that, the reality of the job market is that most of you will probably end up adjuncting, visiting, doing some kind of postdoc, right? And these are great opportunities to learn how to answer this question for yourself, being at an institution. And it's really, really easy, and I see this with my colleagues. The particular postdoc I'm on is a great postdoc, so I haven't had to fight this myself, but it's really easy to get jaded if you're in that situation. You don't have job security. All of those insecurities that we struggle with as academics come out in that situation. But I think it's really important to try to look at these opportunities as an opportunity to learn. So, my department is having a search right now for a tenure track position. I have no say in that. I can't participate in any of the closed doors conversations, but I've gone to every job talk. I've really made an effort to have conversations with people about what's going on here. And I don't know, maybe it might be different in your department, but in religion, I actually don't think the job talks. The job talk that I was asked to give and the ones that I saw were not what I would consider normal job talks. It was definitely sort of a teaching job talk kind of hybrid. This is something this is a hard genre, so seeing other people do it is a good opportunity. So take advantage of those opportunities. If you're lucky enough to, it seems strange to say that, but if you're lucky enough to get a part-time position, take advantage of those opportunities. It is a stepping stone, and look at that in a positive way. The second thing I'll say is that something I learned on the market last year. I reached a point at a couple of campus visits. Some of them went well, some of them didn't go well, and I reached a point where I realized that, I just bring what I bring. You need to prepare, right? But it's like cramming for an exam. You've been preparing for, in my case, it was almost a decade, right? I've been a graduate student for almost a decade. And yes, and it was great too, it really was. You can't transform yourself overnight. There are things you can do, and there are things you should be working on, right? So thinking about publications, thinking about designing courses, thinking about what you might want to teach. But even these things are not things that happen overnight, right? So, there was a point where that resignation was really helpful for me. It was just like, okay, I'm bringing. And if you like it, you like it, and if you don't, you don't. The flip side of that is, I think, what is key here, right? You can't transform that overnight. Learning how to communicate and learning how to branch out and even if it's not quite being a generalist, but having conversations with people who, who are your allies, but who don't do what you do is really, really useful. And really, really important. It's essential. Essential, and it's something else you can learn in these kind of part-time positions. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to ask our panelists collectively to address one more question, and then maybe you'll have many other questions, I'm sure. Maybe we can start to throw the floor open for questions from you. But it does occur to me that we are trying to answer several questions at once in some sense here. We're trying to give you a sense of what the experience of working at a liberal arts college is like. We're trying to give you a sense of what it would mean to get a job at a liberal arts college or to find yourself in the interview situation. Some of you may be here because you're not even sure whether this is an appropriate thing to want. And I want to be sure that we address that curiosity or that maybe need on the part of folks in the room. So I want to ask our panelists to maybe just spend a minute or two saying, what is most important, most notable, most pleasurable, most challenging about the experience of living and working in a liberal arts college community. And anyone can start, doesn't have to be you.
I'm ready, but if somebody else wants to go.
Go.
Okay. So, this may seem a little obvious. It's already come up a bit, but it's sort of the simultaneously most challenging. And I should preface this by saying that I actually commute to Oberlin. I live in Ann Arbor still. I'm there Tuesday through Thursday. But the most challenging / rewarding aspect of it is the sort of small setting, the sort of intimate relationships you have with students and colleagues. It both enables certain kinds of conversations that you couldn't have, or even just thinking of people as colleagues that you wouldn't in a different setting. But also, I remember I'd been in Oberlin for less than 24 hours, and I went to one of the 2 local coffee shops, and I literally had already met every other person that walked by. That was before students got there, but nonetheless. So, depending on your personality, that can be a little enclosed, but it also has its positive sides. And, sort of going along with this too, well, no, I'll leave it at that. We said a minute, so I'll leave it at that.
We're just going to keep this right.
That sounds good.
So I'll say one of the most rewarding things for me is the ability to explore new ideas. I said earlier, I'm an academic contortionist, but I think that's partially because I want to do that. There are plenty of people at my college and in my department who have more narrowly focused research ideas, and that's okay. But for me, it's incredibly rewarding to, look at an ASAP alert and be like, oh, look, drugs with inorganic compounds in them. Oh, what does this mean? And then be able to bring that into my class, just something that is completely tangential to maybe what we've been working on, but I can draw it in and get them excited and keep myself excited about what I'm going to be doing. And sometimes for me, sometimes I don't know necessarily what I'm going to be doing the next day. And that's exciting to me, that I can explore new ideas. And the flip side, it's also very challenging because I do challenge myself. I teach a lot of new classes. And as Ari said, it takes a lot of time to prep a new class. And so again, I have a feeling what you're going to hear is we're going to say one thing and say it's both challenging and a reward. So yeah, just the flexibility.
One of the most rewarding things has already been alluded to, and that is we really do have outstanding students. And putting on my postdoc, Mellon Postdoc liaison hat for a second, and putting in a pitch for Kalamazoo, I think we rank 18th in the country in the percentage of our students who go on to earn PhDs. Okay, and that's among all institutions, R1s, liberal arts, and so forth. So that shows us that a lot of our students are interested in academics. They will really be engaged. They will never be mailing it in. Almost, I mean, I guess they might have a couple of times, but it's really not an issue. And I've never taught more than 22 students in a class. Most of my classes, I have a seminar of 13 right now, is just fantastic. And then the challenge, as I've already kind of alluded to, is just balancing all the various demands. You want to publish, so you're going to do your writing. You want to teach well, because you realize when they care that much, you have to be on the top of your game. You don't want to let your colleagues down. You want to do your fair share of service. So it can be a very full job. And in the end, it really asks pretty much everything every skill you might have will be put to use in some way. So it's a very well-rounded job in that way.
I guess I want to echo a lot of what my colleagues here have been saying, which is that, I mean, start off saying, I really love teaching at a liberal arts college. It is so much fun. It is so much fun on a teaching level to go in, meet with students, and they take the work seriously. They do the reading. They thought about it. Even if they haven't done the reading, they've got some idea that is somehow tangentially related. They feel guilty about not having done the reading. All of these are really nice qualities to have in students. And then, so it's really fun to like push yourself as a teacher kind of constantly, and to not be able to kind of rest. And, you know, there's no one who can get away with, or maybe there's a few, like, I guess, but it's very hard to get away with just sort of like coming into class with the same lecture notes and like, all right, here I have to do this. And the fact that your colleagues take teaching seriously too. So you have conversations with your colleagues about your classes and stuff like that. It's really fun intellectually. And then I think from a research perspective, actually, I mean, being at Oberlin has forced me to learn how to talk to people in different fields. There's nobody else who does the work that I do. And so I have to be able to explain what I do. And it's made my work more comparative. It's made it broader. I don't think I've really sacrificed depth per se, but, you know, it's certainly made me cognizant of the different kinds of academic audiences out there beyond the sort of very narrow specialty that we all develop when we're in graduate school. There's a kind of tunnel vision in graduate school, and liberal arts colleges really force you out of that, and I think that that's a really good thing. I think the challenging part for me is the fact that it's sort of the flip side of it. I mean, sort of as everyone's been saying, there's always a flip side to everything, right? And in here, it's the fact that, as I said, there's nobody else who does what I do. And there aren't people that I can talk to about, like, oh, you know, I was reading such and such book, and I was thinking about this, and do you know this other person, and whatever, the people that are my narrow subspecialty, that in graduate school I became very comfortable with that. And at liberal arts college, there's not going to be anyone else, really, who you can have that conversation with. You know, you can talk to people and they'll read your work and they'll have really interesting ideas, but they're kind of left field ideas. If you're, you know, a lot of times they can help you with the things that, you know, with the sort of nitty gritty stuff that you might be used to or that you might get differently in a different kind of institution. And finally, I think that there's also a fact that there are some people who, and this can be really frustrating, who later on, you know, at liberal arts colleges don't necessarily say take research as seriously, and so sometimes it can feel a little bit like, okay, well, who else is doing really interesting, engaging work? And there are people, but you have to seek them out a little bit more than you might at a place like Michigan.
So that's a lot of suggestion. And I'm sure there are questions out there. Would anyone like to ask one or all of our panelists something?
So a lot of you guys mentioned that there are a lot of different things under the heading liberal arts colleges and that it's important to find out about that. How can we, before we're actually in that setting, find out more about the differences among liberal arts colleges?
Well, I think I'll start with this, which I think that you made a great point about, a lot of the statistics go to the website. It's not that hard to figure out what faculty teaching loads are. If you look at the list of classes in a given department, over a 2-year period and note, how many classes people are teaching. You can find statistics like endowment per student relatively easily, actually, on most liberal arts college websites. Think about it, have you heard of the place before? If you've heard of it before, it's, there are places that have national reputations, places that have regional reputations, places that have more local reputations, that might make a difference. And some of it is that you can really just listen to what you're hearing, like the kinds of questions you're getting asked, what you're told about the job talk you're going to give, and just be sensitive as you're listening to that. If all of the questions you're getting are about teaching, then that's what they care about, right? And so I think that a combination of those two strategies can be really helpful.
Yeah, if I could just emphasize sort of what was implicit in the last part of the comments. I mean, the truth of the matter is that the way the market works is we're probably, I apply to anything that moves, right? That's just the way it is. And that's actually not entirely true. I do have a way that I whittle things down a bit because otherwise I would not have time to write or teach, right? But so the reality is that a lot of this will be stuff that you'll have to do if you're lucky enough to get a campus visit and you actually learn the ethos of the place. And I think that's okay. Even before I was on the market, I was always discouraged when people were like, well, I don't want to teach at a place like that, or I don't want to teach there, I don't want to be there. I don't know, part of this is I'm half anthropologist, so I really believe in going somewhere and being there and finding out about it in that way. But I do think it's important to keep an open mind and find out our place through visiting it. And while you're preparing, doing these things, going online, talking to people who have been there. There's some preparation you do before, but really I think you have to be there, you have to figure it out.
I add about 2 online resources. So the Chronicle of Higher Education has an almanac on higher education that they publish each year, which has institution level data. And also the Carnegie Foundation's website with their Carnegie classifications. That's another website that has lots of institutional level data where you can find out about student population and some of the data that's been mentioned.
And not to go too vulgar in response to this question, but one way to think about the landscape of possibilities is to adopt the perspective of a potential undergraduate. U.S. News and World Report, Washington Monthly, all of the places that rank undergraduate institutions more broadly have specialized or searchable rankings of liberal arts colleges in the U.S. And it's interesting, I think, to see how those institutions pitch themselves to their potential students. You can learn things that aren't entirely quantitative in that way. That's another way to find out a little bit more about the culture and the self-imagination of places like that.
Yeah, well, if I could just add one more thing to that. And it does, it's very time consuming, but once you're applying, it really is good to do some website style research of maybe, say, the top 20 institutions on your list, so that even in your first cover letter, if you can glean just a couple of key points about how that institution sees themselves, and then ideally be able to relate it to kind of where your interests are at. So at Kalamazoo, about 80% of our students study abroad. Okay, so international education and global learning is super important. So if you've done a Fulbright, or if you've had a study abroad experience, or you've done some of that stuff, the fact that you're paying attention to the institution, you may think a search committee wouldn't be that petty, but there are people on that committee who like it when they feel their school is on the map in some way, that the person applying for the job has thought about where they might end up and seen that, oh, you're doing something curricularly that I fit really well with, or you have a certain seminar program. That's not I have this specialty, but I'll also be able to hook into your gen ed program. So very time consuming, at least by the time you're doing maybe an interview. We do our interviews at the MLA, and I'm sure there are professional organizations where you're discipline interviews. By the time you're going to that interview, if we get the sense that the person hasn't done basic web research about the institution to start thinking about fit, it starts to become an uphill battle for the candidate. So the more you're willing to put into this search and find out those details that suggest to you whether you'll be a good fit, the better off you'll be in the whole process, I think.
I had another question here.
Hold hands.
Yeah.
I see your hand. But go ahead.
Thank you for the wonderful insight so far. Could you tell us a bit more about if you made an active choice, and if so, how you made the choice between, say, R1, R2 universities and liberal arts colleges?
Anyone want to start on that?
Well, I guess I'll start. I didn't really know about the category of liberal arts when I went on the job market, and I think all of my campus visits were at liberal arts colleges or universities that had that feel to it. So there wasn't as much of a choice there for me.
I made the choice that I was not applying to R1s at all. I only applied to small schools. And partially it was because I love research, I love being in the lab, I love learning new things, but I was also very interested in teaching. And so I wanted, you guys are probably starting to get this, I wanted the best of both worlds. I wanted to be able to do a lot of different things and have that diversity in my career.
I'm not sure I just applied to the jobs that were available. And I think I made some cuts, like places there was no way I was going to go for various reasons. But aside from that, if there was a job, who was I to choose? And then Oberlin actually hired, at that point, we've changed this, but it used to be that they hired early. So they offered me the job by Thanksgiving. And so I hadn't even heard about most of my conference interviews by that point. But, I certainly wasn't going to say no. And so I took the job and I sort of thought, well, I'll see. If I like it, great. If not, I'll apply to other places and whatever. And then I kind of liked it. So, it wasn't like a active choice, but in retrospect, it was a really good fit for my personality. So.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I'm someone who at this point sees myself in either setting or either multiple settings. I don't think about that so much, but when I do whittle jobs down, and I'm just going to throw this out there, I actually think much more about things like location, distance from home, job opportunities for my spouse. I have a family, I have 2 kids, and I don't think there's anything wrong with deciding to apply for jobs for those kinds of reasons. You don't want to advertise that necessarily, but those things are far more important to me than whether I end up in an R1 or a liberal arts college. And that's just, that's not going to be true of everyone, but, I don't ever be ashamed about choosing one job over the other for those reasons, or applying for one job over the other for those reasons.
We have a question here in the
So my question, I'll try to make it not too specific to me, but I'm worried it'll be very nebulous without that. But so I'm doing a dual degree, and so I'm wondering how you think about interdisciplinary applicants. And I'm kind of like you, Vanessa, in the sense that I really think I'll only be wanting to work at a liberal arts college, and just how I think that it's not expected of someone in my disciplines. Every time I say this out loud to advisors or things, they're like, really, are you sure? Not in a judgmental way, but it's just not what I think what's expected of someone in my fields. And so I'm just wondering how you think about interdisciplinary applicants.
Good question.
Can you say what fields?
Yes. Unfortunately, because it's very unexpected. I study higher education in the School of Education, and I study health management and policy in the School of Public Health.
Okay. Yeah, those, we don't have those areas, basically. And I'm not sure how often you will run into that. If somebody, I think in our hiring process, I think there is an advantage, although it's a paradox because we love interdisciplinary teaching. We love that as as a pedagogical outlook. But I think, to be honest, as we hire, you kind of need a home department. And that we would sort of try to locate that person, and our disciplines are sort of the traditional disciplines, so that's another aspect of it.
The other thing that you have to consider is that at most small schools, you're going to be teaching intro classes. You know, and you're going to be teaching Gen Chem, you're going to be teaching comp, you're going to be teaching, you know, intro bio or intro physics. No matter, you know, whatever the intro class is in your specialty, you're probably going to be teaching it at least once a year, if not more often. And so interdisciplinary is okay, but you have to make sure that you can make a very firm and very convincing case that I can teach Gen Chem and I can teach Gen Chem well. Even though I may also be doing biochemistry and a little bit of physics, I can still teach, insert your intro class here. And, you know, echoing what Andy said about you get parked in a department and you have to make a case that you can teach those intro classes.
I think for us, you know, that if you have, the advice I would give is that if you have people who are writing letters for you and you're applying to jobs, almost all the jobs will be in a traditional department, although we actually have a fair number of people who are joint in two departments in history. So we are used to seeing a lot of interdisciplinary degree programs and stuff. But what you want to make sure is that your recommenders can make a case for you for the particular job that you're applying for. So let's say, we'll just go here because you're in history and anthro, right? If you're applying to jobs in a history department, make sure that the history person that's writing for you can make a claim for you as a historian. You know, insert your department here. Make sure that if you're applying for a job in an anthro department, that the anthro person can make the claim that you're really an anthropologist in these ways. It's very hard for you as a student to make those claims yourself as much. It's just hard to know exactly the language to speak. I mean, you know, you could do your best, but what you need to do is make sure that your recommenders are on the same page and that they really, in many cases, have letters that are tailored to the particular departments the different kinds of departments that you might be applying in. At the very least, your dissertation supervisor and maybe the senior person in whatever field you're applying for. So let's say your supervisor were an anthropologist, you've got a historian on your committee, make sure that, say, for history jobs, that historian has a separate letter for that. So because those are the questions that people are going to be asking, to make sure that you have that training. In most cases you do, it's not really that issue, but you need someone to make that case for you.
And I guess I sound too discouraging. I know in my own field, I have a PhD in literature and I have a degree in creative writing. So I was hired as a hybrid person into an English department because I could cover two types of courses. So that's there is this advantage because of the pressure to become a generalist in a liberal arts setting, the sense that you can cover more than one field once you're in the institution is really useful because you can teach in particular programs and stuff like that. So I don't want to be too pessimistic about that, but it's something to finesse as Ari and others are talking about. Yeah.
Other questions?
Dana's question was about interdisciplinarity. So I was pushing even harder, but
Pause there. I think there's a question over here.
yeah, we come here.
Okay.
So I guess this is a little bit more directed at Vanessa, but anyone can answer because physical sciences, yeah. So you guys have also spoken a lot about transitioning more from the specialist to the generalist and sort of going on the job market for more postdoctoral positions. It sort of seems right now that I can sort of choose to go and really focus my research or really broaden my horizons and look to something new. I'm wondering what you guys did if you did postdocs and how you think that's benefited or what you think you would do differently.
I broadened my horizons. When I did a postdoc, and I definitely broadened my horizons. It was in the same general field as physical organic, but really kind of like a 78-degree turn within the field. And I think that did help me a lot because, again, this idea that I can teach a lot of different courses, I know enough about a lot of different things that I'm comfortable jumping into different areas. So part of it is also, you always have to think about what you want to do next. Why are you doing the postdoc? It's if you want to learn about a new idea because you think that it's going to help your research and a research agenda that you're thinking about setting up, then definitely do that. But if you're just thinking, oh, well, she said, well, I should broaden my horizon, so I'm going to go do something completely different, that may not be the best idea. If you're really interested in a specific research agenda, then maybe it is, and it's more like what you're doing as a PhD, then maybe it is more useful. So I think it really depends on what you want to do. I'm sorry that that's so wishy-washy.
Anyone else have thoughts about this? Daniel, maybe because you're in the postdoc now, you could speak from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, so I've never been good at, I have these like plans, but they're always very nebulous, and so things kind of happen as I go. I mean, with this postdoc, I mean, it's much more of a teaching postdoc, right? Although you only teach one course, right? So you have a lot of time to do your own research. So in that sense, I mean, I'm not at a stage where I'm looking to a next project, but I'm not ready to engage it yet, right? I'm not ready to do that. So when it comes to my research, what I've done over the past 6 months is gotten 2 articles out under review, right? But that's based on previous research, and I haven't really started anything new. I mean, I was hired to teach specific things. I mean, they were looking for someone who had a specific skill set, and Southeast Asia was of particular interest because of the connections Oberlin has to exchange programs in Southeast Asia. So I just kind of went along with that, right? I mean, this is what was required, and this is what, and it's it's stuff that I really like to teach. So. I'm not sure if that's helpful to you at all or not. I mean, I guess I just haven't, the particular position I'm in is not one where I'm not ready to do that next project yet when it comes to my research. And as far as teaching, there were specific things that we negotiated at the beginning. So I don't know, does that answer your question or not?
I could just speak.
Good, yeah.
Since I'm realizing that I advise or am the liaison for this postdoc program, I should say something about it. At the postdoc program that Daniel's involved in and that we have at Kalamazoo is designed to give you experience teaching and give you time to do research. Okay, so you would teach for us, you would teach 1 course per quarter. We have 3 quarters during an academic year. And then the other time would be for doing research. Often, because of the timing, it does mean you're probably applying for a job as well. But I've seen our postdocs go on to have great success getting tenure-track jobs. It just gives their resume that many more courses you've taught, you'll get a couple of papers out maybe during that time. You'll get more letters of recommendation of somebody who's observed your teaching. You'll have some teaching evals as if you were out there. So another liberal arts school can say, oh, this person is taught successfully at a liberal arts college. And you just look better and better. So we've had a really high placement rate, and people going to great schools like Williams and Mount Holyoke, and just really successful after doing a postdoc. So I think it's really to your advantage if there aren't other good options. Yeah.
So I just want to clarify, we've had a lot of opportunities and information thrown at you over the course of the last hour or so. The postdoc program that we're all talking about and representing up here at the front of the room is run through the University of Michigan. It's a Rackham-sponsored program funded by the Mellon Foundation, and it places 2 students per year at each of the 2 institutions represented here, Oberlin College and Kalamazoo. And this is only for University of Michigan recent PhDs and people who are expecting to take the PhD before they would start the term of the postdoc. So it's an extraordinary opportunity, and Andy's right to suggest that the PhD alumni from Michigan who've gone through that program have gone on to make wonderful careers, many at liberal arts institutions, others at R1s or R2s. So please look at the resource packet that Laura handed out. If you have more questions about that, hang around afterwards. I just want to put in a plug for that opportunity. The application period is now open. just to put that on your radar. Other questions while we have our panelists here? We have time for.
I just want to say too, I'm more than willing to talk to anyone about my experience.
Great.
I'm meeting with 2 people next week. I live in Ann Arbor, so I'm here Fridays through Mondays, so we can actually meet for coffee, and I'm happy to talk to you afterwards, or after we're outside. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions?
I have a question. A couple of you mentioned this idea of a teaching demonstration, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that entails. Like, does the applicant choose the topic? Does the school choose the topic? Is it a lecture? Is it a seminar? And for those schools who don't have that as part of the interview process, if you could just talk a little bit about what a typical campus interview visit at your school is like.
We do use a teaching demonstration, and we create an artificial class. So it would be, recently we did a 19th century British lit search, and we gave that as the topic to the, so teach something in your field. We brought together majors, so it wasn't an existing class. We just got 10 or 15 majors into the room, and it allowed the person to sort of teach an hour-long lesson where they could give us handouts ahead of time that we could give to students so they could actually do a little bit of reading for the class. Most of the time, somebody will bring in a text that can be read in the class, maybe contextualized, read, and talked about. And it usually runs for about an hour. And they'll be usually, in the room will be those 10 or 15 students we've dragged in there, and then the whole search committee and you know, most of the department will watch that demonstration.
Well, the advice that we give people who are applying for jobs is, and I think that at Oberlin this does differ somewhat by department, but what we tell applicants is give a talk about your research that would be accessible to advanced undergraduate students. What does that mean, you might ask? And I'm not sure we entirely know. However, what we mean, by and large, means, first of all, not a huge amount of historiography, you know, just get into what you're doing. But don't make it a lecture. Don't dumb it down. It should be about your research. And remember that, of course, you know, at Oberlin at least, you know, ultimately, okay, so you do meet in a campus visit. You will meet with there's major reps. Every department has several of them, and they meet with candidates, usually over lunch or something like that. There are other opportunities to meet students, depending on the way the position is defined, et cetera. But generally speaking, you know, the major reps will write up a report. And then all the undergraduates who go to your lecture, we don't require anyone to go aside from the major reps, but usually if you show up, they'll write an evaluation. And then the major reps will turn that all into basically a student report. But ultimately, the people who are making the decision are not the students. The people who are going to hire you are the faculty. And so your real audience is the faculty. Now, the faculty care about what the students have to say. But I can remember actually quite a few times where we've had a situation in which the students didn't like a particular candidate or really liked another candidate, and the faculty decided to go a different way. We talked about it. There were reasons why that decision got made, but ultimately your audience really is the faculty, at least at Oberlin. And so in general, I'm not sure this is the case at every institution, but if you're applying to Oberlin, err on the side of pitching your talk too high rather than too low.
So actually, it sounds like it's not that different than what I was asked to do. So maybe it varies by department less than I thought. But I mean, the only sort of thing. So I had to give a job talk for this postdoc. I was asked to do that, and it was a very similar kind of thing. The only thing I'll say is it was actually kind of pitched in the reverse. It was kind of pitched to me as, this is, you're teaching a class, but make it sophisticated enough to impress the rest of us.
Oh, that makes no sense.
Yeah, that's how it pitched me. I think anytime you're asked to do something like this, it's really important to really make sure you do the best you can, ask as many people as you have access to find out about the genre in that particular department and what they really want. Because if you don't and you sort of pitch it wrong, then it can undermine everything that you do, even if you give a really good talk. So the impression I got, and clearly worked well, I was hired, and I got good feedback from the talk from both students and professors, was, wait, I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, I just lost what I was going to say. So what was it?
Getting feedback.
Yeah, getting feedback. If I remember, I'll come back to it. But the point is the big point is that to try to find out, really understand what the genre is when you're asked to do these hybrid things, because again, if you don't, then it can really undermine that. So I'm sorry for I'm getting tired.
Can I just say, just point of observation, over many years of watching candidates give job talks here at Michigan and other R1s, it's a complicated genre no matter where you're giving that job talk, whether it's comes under the rubric of teaching demonstration or hybrid talk or job lecture or whatever it might be. Perhaps it's worth being more anxious about the job talk in a liberal arts context than not. But I guess I would say that the same level of care, attention, anxiety, attempt to imagine what it's like is probably required wherever that job talk is going to happen. So my advice, not having the experience that the panelists do, would be to suggest maybe not fetishizing the job talk particularly in the liberal arts context, but just again, understand that it's a challenge. Your job is to meet the challenge as best you can and to use the resources you have to do that. Other questions?
If it's okay, I'll touch on very a minute on the rest of the day, because your job talk is only an hour. And our job interviews at Albion for tenure track are 2 days. So you're in, and the other 15 hours that you're at Albion interacting with people, you're in hour-long interviews with usually every person in our department. We meet with each person usually 45 minutes to an hour. You have lunch with the students. You meet with the president, you meet with our diversity committee, you meet with the provost, you meet with, I think, 2 other committees on campus. And so you're talking a lot. And one of the things, here's a piece of advice, when you're in these hour-long interviews, especially if it's towards the end of the second day, and I've been that interviewee at the end of the interviewer at the end of the second day. Person comes in, we chat a little bit. So do you have any questions that you want to ask me? How's your interview been? Is there anything that you still want to know? Don't say, no, I think I got it. Okay. Even if you ask the same question that you've asked 16 other times, for you that's important because you can get the perspective of several different people. So job interviews are more than just a job talk. They're 2 days of talking and talking and talking.
So this is in response to, is this on? Yeah. Yes. To what you just said. So you get to the end of the day and you've asked, you're at the end of the interview, you've asked all of your questions. But so I'm really concerned with fit. I've had other jobs in past lives and the problem was fit. And so I want to find a good fit with a university or college. And so I want to ask people personal questions, or what questions that seem personal, like how do you like living in Oberlin? This is a teeny tiny little town. What do you not like about Albion? What's your biggest pet peeve? I want to know something that seems kind of personal and maybe appropriate, maybe inappropriate in an interview. So would you recommend asking those questions ever? And if yes, when? And what not to ask? That's very wide open, but I think you get my gist.
I think I would ask anything about people's experience in the most general way possible. What's it been like for you here? And sometimes we'll have a lunch with the candidate with other faculty members who aren't on the search committee. Sometimes that's a good time to ask a slightly less formal question like that. I probably wouldn't ask, what is your pet peeve about the institution? They may answer you in detail. They may, or it just may, they may not want to go there, or there's just an awkward thing. Yeah.
All right, no. Vanessa.
Go ahead.
I'll just say briefly, for as much as the interview is I'm interviewing you for my position, you're also interviewing me. You're trying to figure out if it is a good fit. And if living in a small town is a concern, then you should ask that question. Maybe not lead off with that as the first question, but at the end of your hour-long or 45-minute interview, if there's time, maybe then that is the time to bring it up, or in a more informal lunch or evening or coffee break or something like that. But don't forget that the interview does go both ways, that if you are offered a position, you can always turn it down if you don't think it's a good fit. And that's actually really important. So, I'm sorry.
I think it's important to sort of read the room in a way and know who you're talking to, because you can, especially the more personal the question is, the more room for making a horrible campus visit ending mistake, right? And I'm saying that like, because it really is true. Like there was a candidate, okay, this is my second year at Oberlin, someone who's interviewing for a tenure track job. I was the last interview of the day. I'm sure he was exhausted. The question, of course, he chose to ask me when I asked him, do you have any questions, was, I see you're not wearing a wedding ring. I was not married. Indeed, I was not married at the time. So what's it like being single here? Like, who the hell thinks that's an appropriate question to ask someone on an interview? It is not. You don't ask questions about other people's personal lives unless they offer information. But here's the thing, at liberal arts colleges, people tend to offer information, right? So if someone is talking to, now one thing, never bring up, and this is true anywhere, if there is a spousal hire issue, you do not bring it up at the interview. If in fact, anything related to your personal life in that kind of way, like if, probably don't bring it up. However, if they offer information and it feels like you could ask a more personal question, especially if it's something like, someone says like, say in Oberlin, like I live in Cleveland and, I commute in and whatever, that's why I was picking you up. You could ask, well, what's it like living in Cleveland and commuting? That's a perfectly acceptable question. But I would err probably on the side of asking less personal questions until you have the job in general, although and I would really just kind of read the room, read the person you're talking to, read what that relationship's like, and try and use that as a guide to where to go.
Just add one thing real quick. So including Oberlin, I had 3 campus visits last season, and I actually found that these things came up without me having to ask. And this was at all different kinds of institutions, right? I mean, because it's like a 2-day thing, you're with people all the time in various kinds of settings. Not some people feel like they have to present to the institution in certain kinds of ways, or they have certain investment in the search, so they tend to be a little more reserved. And other people are just like, they're waiting to get you away from all of that so they can tell you what they think it's really like. And sometimes tell you things that, if they want you to take the job, they probably shouldn't have told you. I mean, I heard all sorts of things about these institutions, and this is both a liberal arts and a research institution. So, I think everyone's right. Wait, let people take cues from other people, and know that you're going to find these things out because people are going to want to tell you. I think, anyway.
If someone has a burning desire to ask a general question, we can probably take one more. And if not, that's okay, because I think our panelists would be happy to just stay up at the front of the room if some of you have more specific questions or want to interact with panelists. One more. Okay, one more at the back.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could clarify where the spectrum is for the types of liberal arts schools. Does it start at where Dartmouth is or shift forward? I find that it's hard to sort of categorize where schools are, and maybe talk about what the different types of liberal arts schools there are and how the expectations of candidates might change.
Dartmouth, from my understanding, is an Ivy League research institution, so that would not be on the spectrum. But I think you could really probably use teaching load as something of a rough guide. There is, if you have an institution where people are teaching 4-4, they're probably, the kind of research they can do is probably somewhat different, I would imagine, than if it's a place that's 2-2 or 2-3. But there's also many differences. It's not like one spectrum. So there's denominational liberal arts colleges. I don't think any of us teach at one of these, but there are plenty of places which are religious, and that's a whole other can of worms, versus more secular schools. There are schools that are politically oriented in one way or another. There are also, I think it's kind of a hard, liberal arts colleges kind of pride themselves on having students who are individuals in some way, right? And in a similar way, every liberal arts college is its own special snowflake, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I started by bringing up the question of, is there a liberal arts college model, really? And yeah, I just want to echo what Ari said. I don't think you can think of it as a spectrum at all. There are so many different spectrums, and I mean, even things like the kinds of students that attend different kinds of schools, right? I mean, I've applied to jobs where half of the students that attend a particular liberal arts institution are first-generation college students, right? I mean, it's a very different kind of institution than one where that is not the case. So there are multiple spectrums, and it's really about fit, right? It's really about where you see yourself and what kinds of work you want to be doing, and how you see yourself fitting into these larger, social and personal and political and research kinds of questions. Like, where do you see yourself?
No other comments on that one?
I think one of the basic spectra that it can be narrowed down to is teaching versus research. And looking at teaching load is, I think, the easiest way to decide where that falls. 2-2 is, I think, a fairly light teaching load for a liberal arts college. For humanities and social sciences, that's 2 lectures each semester. In the sciences, 2-2 is probably 1 lecture, 2 labs. Labs count as usually half a lecture, and so that would be a 2-2 load. Albion is 3-3, and so 3-3 is probably a little bit more on the heavier teaching side. 4-4 would be very heavy teaching.
So again, all things to think about in terms of fit, in terms of your aspirations. I think the hesitation that you're hearing from all the panelists about how to answer the question is probably a good index to how hard it is to answer that question, if that's any help. I know that our panelists each have other events and commutes and other things to look forward to. So I'll call the official question and answer part of the conversation to a halt here. And I know that, again, that our panelists are happy if you have specific questions. We have a few minutes afterwards. Please first join me in thanking them for their time and their goodwill here in helping us with all of this. So thank you.